Trump closes his deal on Baghdadi. And there's supposed to be a special announcement tomorrow at 9. Are they related? Let's talk about it, y'all. Middle America. Well, good Lord. There I was, driving home from a win at an escape room. My mouth is killing me. That's why we need Medicare for all. And what do I see flash on my dialer on CNN? Well, actually, what ended up happening was I was checking the Middle America site. And by the way, if you'd like to take part in the Middle America community, all you have to do, dear listener, is facebook.com/America Middle. You can also hit me at vinantori@gmail.com if you would like yourself a Middle America hoodie, t-shirt, etc., etc., etc. But anyway, the first thing I found was actually from one of the most important people that's a friend of this channel, by Ranter Matt. Ranter Matt said something to the effect of Trump has an announcement to make at 9 o'clock, and then he went out of his way to say he was going to sleep through it because Ranter Matt is not a fan of Trump. You should check out his videos, by the way. They're very good. So then I went to CNN. And then lo and behold, at CNN, what do I see? ISIS leader al-Baghdadi believed to have been killed in U.S. military raid. So it seems to me that this is obviously the big thing that happened that Mr. Trump tweeted about. This is still surreal to me that we have a president that does this stuff. But he really couldn't help himself, and you know, Mr. Trump is a showman, and so you know you can't really be surprised. But Trump tweeted this: something big just happened. There it is on your screen, and then he announced that there will be a call at 9 o'clock. Here's what Fox News has to say: ISIS target believed to be Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is killed in Syria, sources say. The Islamic State group leader, who reportedly had a $25 million bounty on his head, is believed to have been killed in Syria. A high-value ISIS target, believed to be Islamic State mastermind Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, was killed by U.S.-led forces in Idlib, a well-placed military source told Fox News on Saturday night. A senior Trump administration official later confirmed the source's account. But at 9:23 p.m. Saturday, President Trump posted a Twitter message hinting at very big news. Soon after, the White House issued a statement that major news should be announced there at 9 a.m. Sunday. Newsweek reported late Saturday that Baghdadi was killed during a special operations mission that President Trump approved about a week ago. In September, an audio recording purportedly by Badhadi included a call of members of the extreme group to use any means necessary to free Muslims who are being detained by crusaders and their Shia followers. The U.S. had reportedly a bounty of $25 million for information leading to the capture of Baghdadi. Earlier this year, Iraqi intelligence officials speaking to Fox News maintained he was lurking in the Syrian border town, often donning non-traditional or regular clothes, using a civilian car and making sure all around him had no mobile phones or electronic devices in order to bypass detection. Some experts had predicted that as time had passed and ISIS losses in the Middle East started to mount, it was inevitable that Baghdadi would either be captured or killed. Baghdadi is probably moving around a lot to avoid detection, Jeffrey Simon, a terrorism expert, said, but it will be just a matter of time before he's found. I believe that he's still alive, he added at the time. News of his death would have been hard to keep secret for very long. So there ends that chapter, if we're right. I remember when Mr. Obama did the same thing with bin Laden. They called a special, media block for him, and he was able to speak, but he didn't tweet it out. And I gotta tell you, I'm kind of torn at Trump's habit of tweeting these monumental issues before we get the official release. Now, on the one hand, you like your president to kind of maintain the dignity of the office and not talk about things like that. But on the other hand, if the president is working for us and he's our employee, it stands to reason that shouldn't we be happy that he's communicating these things in a form where the common man can ingest them? So I'm a little bit torn, but I'm probably only torn because I have a traditionalist mindset on what a leader's supposed to do. that type of transparency is probably really a good thing. The story of Badhadi is obviously a very gruesome one. Mr. Badhadi was held in Iraq from about October 2004 to December 2004. He was then handed over to the Iraqis who released him. He then got hooked up with an Al-Qaeda faction in Syria. I don't know if he was in Jabhat al-Nusra or if he was in Ansar al-Sharia. But his group was working closely with the other rebel factions to overthrow Bashar al-Assad. And he then broke off from Al-Qaeda, declared himself the Khalifa, and we saw the terror and the blood that happened in the last 3 to 5 years. Now, what's interesting about this guy, a little bit of history, his name is actually not Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. His name is actually Ibrahim Awad Ibrahim al-Badri. He changed his name to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi for a very, very specific reason. After Muhammad basically united the Arab Peninsula and he was dying, the person that took over for Muhammad was his right-hand man, and his name was Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr is actually a nickname. It's called a kunya in Islam. He was nicknamed Abu Bakr as-Sadiq, and Sadiq means the truthful, the honest. So Abu Bakr became the first caliph in Islamic history, and a caliph is just somebody who takes over in place of another. It's kind of like a vice regent. So Muhammad died, he was the leader of the Islamic nation, and then Abu Bakr, Muhammad's best friend, then took over as the caliph after him, the one who replaces Muhammad. And then after that, everybody who would come after that, you had Abu Bakr, and then you had Umar ibn al-Khattab. So you had these people who took over after Muhammad died. The first person to take over after Muhammad died is named Abu Bakr. And so it stands to reason he changes his name to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi because he's signifying now that he is in that line of succession to lead the Muslim nation. Al-Baghdadi simply means the one from Baghdad. The Baghdadian, or the American, the Frenchman, the whatever. And so you had another terrorist by the name of Anwar al-Awlaki. He was from the tribe of Awlak, right? So that's what his name means, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. This guy was, there's an argument that says that he was radicalized when he was in our possession in 2004. I think that argument works for Anwar al-Awlaki, but it does not work for Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Awlaki was actually friendly to the West. Awlaki was actually in a post-9/11 documentary about Islam, where he was actually teaching in the White House Islam, and he was friendly to Islam, and then he got extradited to a CIA black site, I believe, in Yemen. He got treated horribly, and then he became a terrorist. That is not what happened to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. He was caught in 2004 as part of the insurgency. After we toppled Saddam Hussein and ran through that country, you had a whole bunch of insurgents, mostly coming from Syria. You had Syria, Lebanon, etc., those places around, and they decided that they were going to enter into the fray, and it's then that we caught Mr. Baghdadi. We later handed him over to the Iraqis, who immediately released him. Now you'll see in his statement, the very last statement he made about going after the Crusaders and the Shia. Of course, al-Baghdadi is a Salafist Sunni Muslim. They're the largest group of denomination of Islam in the Muslim world, the Sunnis are. And the Salafists are those who basically follow the examples of the early leaders of Islam. And so they're dire enemies of the Shia. Now, I'm not going to get into all the particulars of why Sunni Muslims hate Shia Muslims, but suffice it to say, there are massive pockets of Shiaism in Iraq, and you also had Hezbollah in Lebanon, who actually joined to fight ISIS. This is why I said in the previous video, this stuff is extremely complicated. So the Lebanese Muslims are Shia. And so then you had the FSA, you had Jabhat al-Nusra, you had Ansar al-Sharia, you had all these other groups, and their job, including the FSA, their job was to go and fight and take over the government, just like what had recently happened in Libya with, U.S. help and Mr. Barack Hussein Obama's aid. So during that period, we were actually arming these rebels, giving them CIA assets in order to accomplish the mission of deposing Bashar al-Assad. We had just done it in Egypt, and we had just done it in Libya. You know that part where Hillary cackled about murdering Mr. Gaddafi.
So, that is the land of unconfirmed.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
Did it have anything to do with your visit?
No, I'm sure it did.
And so it was in that milieu that Mr. Baghdadi then decided all of a sudden that he was the true Khalifa, the true replacement of Muhammad and Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman and all the rest of these great leaders in Islamic history. He then decided not to go after the Americans or the Jews. The first group of people he decided he was going to kill were part of the FSA. The FSA stood for the Free Syrian Army, and they were secularists. So in Baghdadi's mind, these guys are worse than Bashar al-Assad. They're just like Americans, etc., which of course we were supporting the FSA along with other ones. So he quickly got his crew together and started turning his guns on the FSA. And then he gave Jabhat al-Nusra and Ansar al-Sharia an opportunity to accept him as a true Khalif. And then they were able to go and do what they did. And you'll see those videos, all those videos of those Iraqi police officers or military men being basically herded like cattle and shot to death. These are all Shia. So a lot of what was happening with Baghdadi was sectarian, in that the Shia were immediately murdered, just completely killed. And that's because of the long-standing feud between Shia and Sunni. And so the majority of the people who have been victimized by Mr. Baghdadi are actually other Muslims, fellow Muslims, not only Shia, but also Sunni, who were not as up on their deen as they should have been. I saw a special report from some deserters of al-Baghdadi's talking about him having some of his minions having a woman beheaded on the day of her wedding because she wore no veil and didn't have any makeup, and her husband allowed it, which, obviously is not a crime worthy of death in actual Islam. You won't find anything in the Quran, the Hadith, or even the Sirah literature, which is a biography of the life of Muhammad, where Muhammad would have ever recommended executing someone for wearing makeup and not having a hijab. So this is a guy who broke off, created the most violent group, one of the most violent groups in Islamic history. He was a guy that was so horrible that folks in Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan were warning him to chill out, were telling him that he was going too far, and his response was essentially to say, join the Khalifa, or otherwise you're an unbeliever. And so if Delta operators, this is probably a Delta hit with CIA giving the positive ID, or a DevGru hit, which is SEAL Team 6, same thing. This is a tremendously good thing. I generally, as a Christian, do not delight in the death of anyone, because the Bible says that God does not delight in the death of the wicked. However, this man fomented such useless blood spilling and such grotesque, gruesome attacks on people that there was really no other way to end this thing. And I do not believe that ISIS is going to be able to recover from this in any sort of feasible way. He was a dynamic leader. He had already paid his dues, and the people that rolled with him legitimately believed him to be what he claimed to be. And I don't think you're going to be able to really hear much work from them once it's confirmed that he's gone. I mean, how many Al-Qaeda hits have you really heard about since the death of bin Laden? These groups it's one of the flaws in these groups is that they need a very powerful, charismatic leader, otherwise they completely fall apart, which is pretty much every movement on the planet. So, Mr. Baghdadi, by all intents and purposes, wanted to die a martyr's death, apparently, and apparently he got it. Good news for the people in that region. Good news for the Yazidi. Good news for Christians who are almost completely ethnically cleansed from Baghdad. There's no call for Mr. Obama to go and send troops to protect the Christians in Baghdad. That was actually an attempt at genocide. What's happening between the Syrians and the Kurds is in no way, shape, or form a form of genocide. But what Mr. Baghdadi did to the Christians in Iraq absolutely was. Those are the facts. And Trump is he's gonna take credit for this. He is going to use this as another example of America winning. He is going to now. Of course, the interesting part of this is he got killed in Syria. And we supposedly pulled all our troops out of Syria, but there was troop movement in Iraq. And so if you put two and two together, look, if Trump moves out of Iraq in the next week or two, then it'll be confirmed, right? He moved the troops out of Syria and moved them to Iraq to give this dude a sense that maybe, things are calmed down now. And when he stuck his head out, they got him. If that's what happened, now I don't believe we'll ever really know what happened, but if that's what happened, good Lord, Trump is continuously winning here. And you got to give it to the man. Whether or not you liked Mr. Obama, he got something done that Mr. Bush couldn't get done. And whether you liked Mr. Trump, he got something done that Mr. Obama didn't get done. And you got to, when you think about all the manpower and all the artillery and all the innocent civilian casualties that came about because we were trying to find bin Laden, good night. Look at what's going on here. We have a very, very small number of troops. We kept it to guerrilla warfare, which is basically what these guys specialize in. And they had a successful mission. So hats off to them. Hats off to Mr. Trump. You got to give it to him. And my brother... I talked to my brother for guidance on these things, and I remember one time, right after the bin Laden hit, my brother messaged me. He goes, "Well, there you go. It's 4 more years for Mr. Obama." Like I said, congratulations to him. Hopefully, all the families that have been terrorized by this guy can finally have some peace. And, in the documentary I watched, there were a lot of former ISIS guys, or ISIL, or Daesh, whatever you want to call them, who were desperately afraid of getting out. One guy said the minute the thought sprang to his head, he became terrified, because if they found out that you wanted to leave the Islamic State, you know what'll happen. So hopefully this results in a mass exodus from people within the Islamic State who want to leave. And hopefully the Iraqi elements and the Syrian elements can go about eradicating the remaining loyalists. But make no mistake about it, Mr. Baghdadi, to some degree, was a creation of both the Bush and Obama administration. He was a creation of Bush in the sense that he removed the strongman in the area, Mr. Hussein, and left a complete power vacuum that really has never been filled by the Iraqi people. And you've got to lay Mr. Baghdadi's existence initially at the feet of Mr. Bush for bringing us into these wars. I think this raid just proved that we didn't need to set up shop in Afghanistan with the massive army that we have. We didn't need to do that. We could have sent in some DevGru and Task Force 215, whatever you want to call it, get a CIA jawbreaker team in there and handle business. But instead, we threw the full weight of the U.S. military at Afghanistan, and we did the same thing for Iraq. So you have to lay the existence of Mr. Baghdadi at the feet of Mr. Bush. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty certain, based on the data that we have, if Mr. Baghdadi was released to the Iraqis in 2004, that would also put the blame squarely on Mr. Bush. Now, to be fair, how do you know which one is going to turn into a Baghdadi? You don't. And as far as Mr. Obama goes, Mr. Obama obviously had the same opportunities that we did not take ISIS seriously, and because he made this statement, there will be no American troop boots on the ground, it seems to me that he could not fight Mr. Baghdadi in the way that he needed to be fought, because then he would have been going back on his word, which you know that most politicians don't really want to go back on their word. So here we are, Trump cleaning up the mess of the Bushes and the Obamas. You got to give it to him, and believe me, if you don't give it to him, he's going to take it. So there you are, dear listener. Love your neighbor. Take care of each other. Middle America, we are the media. Till next time, guys.